Once in a while, one gets the great blessing of hearing from a completely unexpected quarter confirmation of basic Christian truth and the gospel. And this week was one of those weeks for me, as I was just scrolling and trolling through the internet as my morning news readings. I came upon an article from Entrepreneur magazine. Not my usual material, but interestingly enough, it said, competitive advantage comes from surprising trait. This article was by Zachary Feder and Katera Shaibzada. Forgive me, Katera. So, what is the surprising trait that gives a competitive advantage? The surprising trait will not be particularly surprising to you if you are familiar with the gospel, with the teachings of Jesus Christ and his disciples. But what may surprise you is, in fact, how effective they have discovered this trait is. So, the article begins. In an age where authoritarian power is being questioned from the classroom to the boardroom, the emerging research is conclusive. Humility is a dramatically more powerful and effective way of leading. Scientific inquiry into the power and effectiveness of humility in the workplace has shown that it offers a significant competitive advantage to leaders. According to a study from the University of Washington Foster School of Business, humble people tend to make the most effective leaders. The article says, that's right, the most, and are more likely to be high performers in both individual and team settings, according to Associate Professor Michael Johnson. Unsurprisingly, researchers found that employees who rated their managers as humble reported feeling more engaged, less likely to quit. They also reported being more committed to a leader's vision and more trusting and receptive to their ideas. Wow. The most effective method of leadership is humility. Well, should this be surprising if we are followers of Jesus Christ? We read in the Gospel of St. Matthew in chapter 20 the following story. The mother of Zebedee's sons came to him, to Jesus, with her sons, kneeling down and asking something from him. And he said to her, "What do you wish?" She said to him, "Grant that these two sons of mine may sit, one on your right hand and the other on your left," meaning number one and number two. Put them in charge over everybody else. And when the 10 heard it, the other disciples, they were greatly displeased with the two brothers. So they wanted to fight and get their position jockeyed for, right? But Jesus called them to himself and said, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant." Because why? The Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Likewise, we hear the importance of humility in today's epistle reading, which we just heard. He wrote, "It is doubtless not profitable for me to boast, for though I might desire to boast, I will not be a fool, for I will speak the truth. But I refrain, lest anyone should think of me above what he sees me to be or hears from me." So there's no point in being a boastful person, to be a leader who inflates yourself. And Paul had ample reason to boast. He had many good qualities as a leader, and he had a lot of experience, and he had a lot of authority. But he considered the act of elevating himself to be foolish. In fact, there are very real risks in taking the path of pride, of self-elevation, of overconfidence. And we have seen this, haven't we, time and time again. And these are borne out by the research. The article that I read before continues. These are the risks of lacking humility. It's no secret that executives are often hired based on skills and experience, but fired based on personality. Arrogance narcissism, and Machiavellianism are factors that we now know regularly precipitates executive failure. Former CEO of Enron Jeff Skilling, junk bond king and white-collar criminal Michael Milken, and one-time leader at AIG Joe Cassano were all executives lionized by business publications as if their overconfidence was a clear indicator of paranormal abilities, superintelligence, infallible strategic vision, and magical oratory skills. Yet all of those leaders were credited as the cause for the collapse of their organizations. The cause. So much for confidence. And this is not new. Of course it's not new. We in fact see it in the Gospels. There are two characters that immediately come to mind when we're hearing these kind of stories. The first, Herod Antipas, the king at the time of Jesus. He was arrogant, blustering, and foolish. Secondly is Pontius Pilate. He was threatening and bullying and attempted to push his weight around with people as well. But in the end, both of these proved to be the weakest of leaders in their communities. Their lives and careers eventually collapsed because of their negative character traits, which foremost among them were the lack of humility. According to Josephus, the first century Jewish historian, Herod died in exile after having run afoul of the emperor Caligula. Likewise, according to Eusebius, the 4th century church historian, Pontius Pilate fell into similar misfortune, likewise was exiled and eventually killed himself, like an executive in a stock market crash, throwing himself from a window. Both of these men, no doubt, thought of themselves as strong leaders and possessing great power. In fact, they tried to show it off, right? Herod made his vain promises, and in the end, bought himself the head of St. John the Baptist with them. Pontius Pilate told Jesus, "Do you not know what power I have over you?" To which Jesus answered simply, "You would have no power if it had not been given to you from above." Without any pride on his own part, just simple recognition of truth. And the truth is, both men were really weak leaders. Why? Our entrepreneurial writers continue the article, "Humility may not be what you think it is." One of the challenges in proposing a power in humility is that many of us associate humility with weakness and an inability to stand up for ourselves. But humility, as it turns out, has nothing to do with weakness, precisely because it requires a substantial inner strength to embody. One that not only welcomes feedback and criticism, but knows that it is one of the fundamental ways that we grow. In this way, the ability to ruthlessly self-reflect and accurately see our own limitations as much as our own strengths is essential to reaping the benefits of humility. The Dean of HBS, Nina Nohria, whose department has conducted extensive research on various types of leaders, found that all of those who were successful shared one quality in common: reflectiveness, or the ability to possess an accurate view of themselves, warts and all. In practical terms, this means that humble leaders have trained themselves to see the world around them with a much deeper level of clarity. St. Paul is a good example of one of these types of leaders, and he, of course, was the most effective, in a sense, of the apostolic leaders at the time. Thus, he explains why he would not find it profitable to boast. He writes, "Lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet me, lest I be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said to me, My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore most gladly I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me." Basically figured it out. That if he tried to be perfect and present himself as perfect and tried to fool everybody into thinking that he was perfect, that in a way he was shutting out the power of God. And that's exactly what happens to us when we live in a false pride and false humility, which are two sides of the same coin. St. Paul recognizes his limitations and rejoices in the limitations because what he discovers from the grace of God is that that's where God fills in the gaps. That's where God completes him and, in fact, makes his strength perfect. So he's not afraid to admit weakness, and he leads from and through the admission of weakness and achieves real strength through the grace of God. Through humility, we have awareness. And through God, we have strength. So how does this play out on the most practical level? What can you do to identify it in your own life? Our entrepreneurs write, whether we like it or not, those around us can see our humility or our lack thereof far better than we can. Certain scenarios will quickly highlight our strength of character or betray a pridefulness that disguises insecurity. Some scenarios to consider when evaluating a leader's humility, or your own, include 1. When they are being celebrated. Yes. Are they boastful and take all the credit? Or conscious of the full range of elements and individuals that have caused the success? 2. When they are being criticized. Are they self-confident enough to receive feedback and learn from it while honoring themselves in the process? Or do they resist, defend their position, and push back? 3. When they are engaged in competition. Competition's not a bad thing. Do they respect their opponents and see the opportunity to engage with them as a valuable learning experience from which to grow? Or are they ruthless and disrespectful? Do they feel the need to crush the opposition? 4. When they are in a momentary or prolonged position of heightened strength or heightened weakness. That is, when they have a little more power than usual or less. How do they react? Are they graceful to those lower on the hierarchy? Are they receptive to those higher on the hierarchy without feeling that doing either somehow takes something away from them? Can you handle it? Can you handle having power or lacking power? In each of these scenarios, they write, a leader will be triggered into revealing their level of humility by being asked a very specific question in various ways. One that we find at the very root of humility. How comfortable are you with power in yourself or in others? The degree to which leaders have grown into a mature relationship with both sides of the coin of power, having it and not having it, will be clearly illustrated in how they conduct themselves in response to it. Humility reflects a relaxed posture in relation to power, while arrogance will betray an immaturity and awkwardness in the face of it. So, when we realize for ourselves, especially in our spiritual life, that the only really meaningful power and lasting power is the one that comes from God, that grace which makes perfect His power in us, and that it's not our own, we can begin to really benefit from this. St. Paul wrote in Ephesians 2:8-9, "For by grace you have been saved through faith, and that not of yourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast." The gift of God, salvation itself, is this acceptance of our weakness and the grace of God, the gift of God, to save us. And when we have that, how easy it is to have a relaxed posture towards issues of power and powerlessness. Because in the end, all of us are going to be powerless. Sooner or later, we're really going to be powerless in the grave. And we need to be ready for that. We prepare ourselves through humility, through the acceptance of God's grace. And our entrepreneurial authors conclude with the takeaway. When leaders live from a strong, humble center of gravity, they are naturally perceived as more honest, trustworthy, and capable. Because humility prevents excessive self-focus, it also allows leaders to develop deeper perspectives in their relationships, which makes them more perceptive and capable of anticipating the future. They are not fooled by what they see on the surface, and are able to perceive behind the curtain of individuals and whole systems. In this way, humility is a treasure that leaders can only receive once they have taken the journey into the very heart of who they are. This is a business article. Did you catch that? Let me read that again. In this way, humility is a treasure that leaders can only receive once they have taken the journey into the very heart of who they are. This could have been written by any one of the fathers in the Philokalia. Any one of the Holy Fathers have told us the exact same thing. If you want to be useful, you have to recognize what you are inside and go through that journey with Christ. And that is a great treasure. And so they say there's an old saying that seems to capture it. A pseudo-leader always leaves you with a feeling of their greatness, while an authentic leader always leaves you with a feeling of your greatness. The Lord spoke. If you want to be great, this is how. Realize that when God says, if you want to be great, do this, He wants you to be great. That's the thing we forget. We think, well, I'm just a sinner, I'm just worthless, I'm no good, so therefore I won't even bother. God did not put you on the earth to be mediocre, even though that's how we find ourselves every day. He put you on this earth to be great, to be children of God, to be the fulfillment of the gospel in your life, not just once in history, in one person, but in every follower of Jesus Christ. So seek that greatness which you can only find through humility. The humility that Jesus shows on the cross. You want to see a relaxed posture in a position of power? That's it. Christ is among us.